When a player gets cut from a team, especially a team that they played with their entire career, and when that player is a veteran who probably won't find another team to play for again because they're declining in their ability, it's a sad moment. It's not just sad because you got fired from a job you've done for a long time, but it's sad because it marks the likely end of your passion and the transition from football to a different profession. You played football your entire life. You've dreamed of playing it professionally, and you get to play it in the state that you grew up in and play for your hometown team. And it's over just like that, and now you might have to move on and do something else, even though you've been doing this one thing for as long as you can remember. It sucks. It can feel like it's the end of the world, and it can feel like it's the end of your life. But what if I said that for one person, they thought it was? Because this man right here that you've been watching this entire time is Detroit Lions tight end Rob Rubick. We're going to get to how good he was in just a little bit, and what made his journey to the NFL all the more interesting. But when it came time for his journey to end, some people thought that this was the end of the road for him in more ways than one. And what followed was an absolutely confusing mess of a situation and one of the most bizarre roster cuts you'll ever see. And it's a move that deserves a deep dive all these years later. Because this is the story behind one of the craziest roster cuts that you've probably never heard of, and the bizarre end to the career of Detroit Lions tight end Rob Rubick. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one. So if you want to join this community of football lovers, then this is the place for you. Thanks for liking and subscribing and helping grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the cutting of Rob Rubick being harder to solve than a Rubik's Cube. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand just how good Rob Rubick was in the first place. Rubick was a super easy guy to root for and to latch onto, because he was a Michigan guy through and through. He was born in Newberry, Michigan. He went to high school in Newberry. He went to Grand Valley State for college, which was also in Michigan, and he got drafted in the 12th round of the 1982 NFL Draft by none other than the Detroit Lions, who play in Michigan. It's always cool when a player gets drafted, but when a player gets drafted to stay in the same state they've been for their entire life, that's an added bonus. Now, back in 1982, the NFL Draft was only 12 rounds. So when you got to that 12th round and were picking in the 300s, it was a complete crapshoot. For some perspective, of the 28 players taken the previous year in the 12th round of the 1981 NFL Draft, 17 of them, or roughly 61% of them, never even so much as played a single snap in the NFL. And only 9 of the 28 players taken, or just 32% of them, played more than one game in the league. If you found a guy who could actually play football and knew what he was doing by this round, that's a win. And of the 12th round picks from that 1982 draft class, the man you've been watching this whole time, Rob Rubick, was one of the best of them. Rubick ended up playing 88 games for the Lions at tight end, even starting a fair amount of times, and scored 3 receiving touchdowns, finishing his Lion career with 44 catches for 511 yards. Are these numbers great? Not by any means, and no one's pretending otherwise. Having said that, when you're a 12th round pick and you get drafted in 1982, and now it's 1988, and you're still on the team collecting a paycheck 7 years later, especially when you went to a non-Division I school, when you made $35,000 as a rookie, and now you're making about 5 times that, making $170,000 and living comfortably, you must be doing something right. And Rubick absolutely had his moments that could definitely be classified as small wins. He had multiple catches in front of a national television audience on Thanksgiving in 1984 in a win against the Green Bay Packers. He got a first down on the vaunted 85 Bears defense. He scored the first touchdown of the game in a 1987 win over the Dallas Cowboys. And he scored the game-winning rushing touchdown during the 4th quarter of the final game of the 1982 season to beat the Green Bay Packers and send the Lions to the playoffs for the first time since 1970. That alone made him worth the 12th round pick. Everything else is just the cherry on top. Like I said, Rob Rubick's numbers of 44 catches for 511 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns don't seem all that impressive on the surface. But considering the fact that he was a 12th round pick, the Lions struck gold. To give you an idea of what I mean, in the 1980s, only 5 tight ends drafted in the 12th round had at least 500 career receiving yards, with those 5 guys being Clint Didier, Easton Ramson, Larry Hardy, Ken Wisenhunt, and sure enough, Rob Rubick. There were other tight ends who got drafted that flamed out immediately and never played in the league and never made it onto a roster, or played a couple of games and did nothing. But Rubick was one of the only ones who could say that he contributed to his team in a meaningful way. He was a pretty solid number 2 option at the tight end position throughout the decade, and was one of the few mainstays on some fairly mediocre and below-average Lions teams over that time frame. However, by 1988, things were definitely on the decline for the men been watching this entire time. In Week 2, Rubick got the start on the road against the Los Angeles Rams, and he did not play well, as in the 17-10 defeat, he did not catch a pass, and at one point, he even ran the wrong route. 2 games into the 1988 season, and Rubick had yet to catch anything. For the first time in his Lion career, the man was truly a liability. And seeing as Detroit needed to bulk up on the offensive line and free a roster spot for offensive lineman Kurt Singer, and seeing as Detroit had a surplus of tight ends as it was, the move, while painful because of how long he spent with the Lions, was clear. Rob Rubick had to go. Even though Coach Darryl Rodgers said that it was a move the Lions had to make, it didn't make it any easier. Rodgers admired Rubick and his time with the team, saying, "Rob has beaten a whole lot of people out during his time here," referring to how many tight ends had come and gone and vied for his roster spot. He continued, saying, "Rob hasn't had a bad career. He's had an outstanding career, far better than anyone expected. He's an overachiever, and that's a compliment to him as a player. He's a good person." And General Manager Russ Thomas echoed those thoughts, saying, "He was a guy who gave you a day's work and an honest effort." And if this move wasn't easy for the Lions to make, you can imagine how Rubick felt. He didn't see it coming, especially seeing as he started that game against the Rams. So to go from a longtime veteran on the team and starting the game to being cut is kind of a jolt to the system. As Rubick said, "I was shocked. Jerry Venezzi, the vice president of player personnel, said he wanted to see me. And I said, 'You're not asking me out to dinner, are you?' I knew I didn't play great that weekend, but I feel kind of empty. After devoting 11 to 12 years of your life to something, you feel kind of lost because you feel like you can't hold on to anything." Rubick, while hurt about the cut, was also realistic and knew that his career was likely over. He didn't expect teams, especially in the middle of the season, to come calling unless someone got hurt, seeing as he'd have to learn a new playbook and seeing as he was on the decline. So now it came time for Rubick to deliver the news to his family. It was time for Rubick to tell everyone firsthand that he was cut from the team. And if this has felt like a pretty normal story thus far, this is where things get, shall we say, bizarre. Because Rob Rubick decided that, excluding his wife, the first person he should call about this, understandably, was his mother. He broke the news to his mom and said that he was no longer on the team. Naturally, his mother then called other people in the family and told them that her son was no longer employed by the Detroit Lions. Except, his mother decided to go about this in the weirdest way possible. If you're Rob Rubick's mother and you're calling your daughter to let her know the news about your brother, think of how you might tell her. You might say, "Your brother got cut," or something like, "Your brother got released," or something like, "The Lions got rid of your brother." Anything like that to inform her of the news, and you should be good to go. Except, that's not what happened. Because when Rob Rubick's mother called up Rob's sister, she said, "Your brother's no longer a Lion." Let me repeat that. Your brother's no longer a Lion. That statement is factually correct. Rob Rubick was no longer a member of the Detroit Lions. However, what does that sound like? What does that phrase sound like? When you say the word "align" in quick succession like that, and you're calling up with tears in your eyes, delivering sad news that you were not expecting to deliver? What does that sound like you're saying? That's right, a lion sounds awfully close to alive, as in, your brother's no longer alive. It's not like his sister had any idea that he would have been cut, seeing as he was a longtime veteran and just started on Sunday. So it's not like she expected this call. The call came from the mother, not him to deliver the first-hand news. And obviously, if you're not alive, you can't make phone calls. And the mother, presumably, was crying and was shaken up about the news because it was the presumed end of his career and came out of nowhere. So a good chunk of Rob Rubick's family thought that he was dead. They heard a lion and mistook it for alive, and thought that Rob Rubick was no longer alive. Which, yeah, Rob Rubick was still very much alive. He was shocked, but he was in good spirits, and had saved up a ton of money with smart business decisions while he was playing. He had planned to get certified as a teacher once his playing career was done, planning on going to Oakland University if he wasn't playing by the wintertime. He was not dead. He was the furthest thing from dead. He just had a mother who, while super caring and obviously on great terms with her son, seeing as that was the first call he made, was not thinking properly and decided to deliver the news in the worst way possible that made it sound like her son was dead. As Rob Rubick said afterwards on that disastrous phone call, it's not that bad. Oddly enough, this wouldn't be the end of Rob Rubick's NFL career. He got a tryout a few days later with the Atlanta Falcons, but decided not to sign there, as one day after trying out with Atlanta, he re-signed with the Detroit Lions, as they decided to bring back the veteran and release tight end Mark Lewis, making a tight end roster shuffle. I guess you could say he was resurrected. It's not like Rubick did anything once he came back in that 1988 season. He didn't start any other games, he had no catches, and the Lions ended that season with an abysmal 4-12 record, changing coaches in the middle of it all and finishing with the third worst record in football. Rubick was released for good in the summer of 1989, seeing as he was never going to fit in Wayne Fontes' offense. And Rubick never played again for any NFL team after that, although he did have a workout with the Green Bay Packers later in the summer that did not result in him getting signed. Still, in 1988, he got to extend his career by another 9 months at least, even if he didn't necessarily do a whole lot with it on the field. But if you ever want to know how funny the English language can be at times, and how things can very easily get lost in translation, this story involving Rob Rubick is a prime example of that. If someone is giving you unexpected news, is crying, and is saying that your brother is no longer a lion, I'm sure quite a few people would have confused that with an actual death statement. So if you're watching this right now, and for whatever reason, you're affiliated with the Detroit Lions in any way, whether you are a player, a coach, or a family member of one of those people, if your loved one happens to get released from the team, use any other phrase, seriously, any other phrase than they're no longer a lion, and you'll be fine. You will be absolutely fine. Just don't pick the one phrase that makes it sound like they could be dead and truly no longer with us. Rob Rubick is very much alive and well today, and he was very much alive and well in 1988, even if his family might not have thought so at the time, thanks to a horribly worded announcement by his mother. Because in 1988, while Detroit's season was dead, Rob Rubick was absolutely not. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.